My name's Joey. I'm 29, and if you asked anyone in my family, they'd tell you I'm the one who never figured life out. The funny thing is, that used to be true. I was working odd jobs, barely scraping by, and my family loved reminding me of it. My mom always said I needed to get serious. My older brother thought I was lazy, and my dad, before he passed, used to say I'd learn the hard way. Well, life has a weird sense of humor, because the hard way ended up leading me straight to something I never saw coming. A $100 million inheritance from an uncle I barely knew existed. The story really begins about 2 months before I got that phone call. I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The kind of place where you could smell detergent through the floorboards and hear the hum of dryers at 2 a.m. Rent was $700, and even that felt like too much most months. My car was a decade old and made a noise like a dying seal every time I turned left. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't happy either. I just existed, and my family treated me like background noise in their lives. My mom, Linda, was the self-appointed matriarch, loud, controlling, and always right. My brother, Nate, was the golden child. Married young, bought a house, had kids, made 6 figures in sales. He was the kind of guy who used networking as a verb in casual conversation. My sister, Amber, was somewhere in between, a nurse with 2 degrees and the ability to make me feel 12 years old just by raising an eyebrow. We weren't close. After Dad's funeral 3 years ago, the calls stopped. The group text slowed. Eventually, it was like I didn't exist unless they needed something fixed or moved. Then came the call. It was from a law office in New York. The man on the other end said, "Mr. Carter, I'm calling regarding the estate of your late uncle, Jameson Carter." I remember blinking, trying to place the name. Uncle Jameson? The only time I'd heard of him was when Dad mentioned his eccentric brother who moved away decades ago after a family feud. I thought he was long dead, or maybe just didn't want anything to do with us. The lawyer continued, explaining that Uncle Jameson had passed away without a spouse or children, and apparently, I was the only living relative he hadn't cut from his will. At first, I thought it was a scam, but the next day, I got an official letter, embossed and everything, inviting me to New York to discuss the estate. I borrowed money from a friend for gas and drove there expecting maybe a few $1,000s. When the lawyer slid the folder across the table, I laughed, literally laughed out loud, because I thought the number was a typo. 103 million, give or take, in assets and liquid funds. He left all this to me? I asked. The lawyer nodded. He was very particular. He wanted his estate to go to the one family member who didn't ask him for anything. I sat there for a long time, completely stunned. My life had just changed in a way I couldn't even process. But as the shock faded, a strange calm settled in. I realized something. For the first time ever, I held all the cards. And I wanted to see who in my family cared about me. Not the version of me they'd built in their heads, not the failure they liked to look down on, but me, the person. So I made a plan. I didn't tell a soul about the inheritance. I didn't buy anything flashy. I didn't move or quit my part-time job at the hardware store. I kept living exactly as before. The only difference was that I had a secret, one I intended to use carefully. A few weeks later, I started making calls. I began with Mom. She answered on the 3rd ring, already irritated. "Joey, I'm in the middle of something," she said, as if I'd interrupted a state dinner. "Hey, Mom," I said, keeping my voice small. "Listen, I could use a little help. Rent's coming up, and I'm short. Maybe a couple hundred, just until next week." There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. "Joey, you can't keep living like this. You're almost 30. I told you to apply at Nate's company. Why can't you just listen for once?" "Mom, I'm too busy for this right now, Joey," she cut me off. "Figure it out." Click. That was it. My own mother hung up on me when I asked for help. It stung more than I expected. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling this cold mix of anger and sadness building inside me. But I wasn't done. Next was Nate. He answered with his usual confident voice. "Yo, little bro. What's up?" I explained my situation again, pretending to sound embarrassed. "Man," he laughed, "you're still doing this? You know what, Joey? Maybe you should try getting a real job instead of mooching off people. Everyone's hiring these days." I tried to joke it off, but he wasn't playing. "Come on, Nate, just a loan." "Nah, man," he said, still laughing. "I've got my own bills. You'll figure it out." You always do, right? And just like that, he hung up too. I didn't even bother calling Amber. I already knew what she'd say. Something about personal responsibility or boundaries. So I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on a name I barely remembered. Clara. My cousin. We'd met maybe 3 times growing up. Once at a family reunion, once at Grandma's funeral, and once at some awkward barbecue years ago. She lived a few towns over, quiet, kind of shy. We'd never really talked. But something told me to call her anyway. When she answered, her voice was soft but warm. Joey. Wow, it's been ages. Everything okay? I hesitated, then repeated my story. I hate to ask, but I'm in a tight spot. Rent's due, and I. Say no more, she interrupted. Are you home right now? I blinked. Yeah? Okay. I'll be there in a few hours. 3 hours later, she showed up in her beat-up hatchback with a bag of groceries, a thermos of soup, and a folded $20 bill. I know it's not much, she said, smiling awkwardly. But it's something. I tried to protest, but she waved me off. Don't worry about it. Family helps family. That line stuck with me. Family helps family. Because up until that moment, I didn't believe it. Not with my family, anyway. That night, after she left, I sat on my couch surrounded by bags of food and thought about everything. About Mom's cold dismissal, Nate's laughter, and Clara's quiet kindness. I felt something shift inside me, a mix of gratitude and resolve. I realized I'd been given an opportunity, not just to see who cared, but to truly change how things played out. My family had spent years judging me for being the failure. But now I had the means to test every relationship, every bond, every fake smile. So I decided to take it further. I'd pretend to spiral, slowly, believably. I'd make them see what it felt like to ignore someone who needed them, to show them the difference between greed and goodness. But what I didn't realize then was how fast that small experiment would spiral out of control. Because once money enters the equation, especially hidden money, people change. And when the truth finally started to leak out, it didn't just destroy old grudges. It exposed things about my family I never wanted to know. And it all started with one dinner. A dinner I wish I could say went well. But it was the night everything began to unravel. I didn't plan on inviting them over. Honestly, I would have been happy never seeing most of them again. But Mom called me a few days later, out of nowhere, and said, Joey, we should have dinner. It's been too long. Amber's off this weekend and Nate's bringing the kids. Her voice was sugary in that way it only got when she wanted something. For a moment, I almost told her about the inheritance just to see how fast that sweetness would turn into calculation. But I bit my tongue and agreed. The dinner was set for Saturday. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment, even though I knew Mom would still find something to criticize. The place smelled faintly like detergent and coffee. I'd even bought a rotisserie chicken and some sides from the store, cheap but decent. By 6 o'clock, they arrived in a wave of perfume, laughter, and judgment. Mom stepped in first, wrinkling her nose like the air offended her. Oh, Joey, she said, scanning the tiny kitchen-living room combo. Still here? You know, you'd save money if you moved in with Nate for a while. Nate chuckled, tossing his jacket over the chair like he owned the place. Yeah, bro, we've got a guest room. Though, fair warning, the kids wake up early. Might be too much for you. Amber trailed behind them, smiling politely but already eyeing the floor like she was checking for stains. It's cozy, she offered, which was her go-to insult disguised as kindness. I tried to shrug it off. Dinner's ready. I didn't have time to cook much, but Mom interrupted. You didn't make anything homemade? No, just store-bought, I said, feeling small again. She sighed dramatically, like I'd failed an exam. You know, Joey, sometimes I wonder what you do all day. They ate, though Mom complained that the chicken was dry and Nate asked if I even knew how to season food. I just smiled through it, sipping water and letting them talk. Amber showed pictures of her vacation in Italy. Nate bragged about his promotion. Mom told a long story about a charity gala she'd attended, emphasizing how networking with the right people was important in life. I nodded, pretending to care, while inside, I felt this low, steady burn. When the conversation lulled, I said casually, So, Clara stopped by last week. Mom's fork froze midair. Clara? Yeah. She brought groceries when I was short on rent. It was really nice of her. Amber frowned. Clara? Our cousin Clara? The one who still drives that rust bucket? Yeah, I said, smiling a little. She didn't even hesitate. Mom set her fork down slowly. Joey, I hope you didn't make her feel obligated. She's not exactly in a position to help anyone. She offered, I said. Nate chuckled. Man, she's always been too soft. That girl would give her last dollar to a stranger. Mom nodded, satisfied. Exactly. You shouldn't take advantage of that, Joey. You need to learn some pride. Something about that word, pride, set my teeth on edge. My mom had spent her entire life preaching pride while using shame as her favorite tool. I wanted to tell her that Clara had more compassion in one act than my entire family combined, but I stayed quiet. Then Nate leaned back in his chair, stretching like he'd just finished a shift. So, Joey, what's the plan? You sticking with the hardware store forever? Or are you finally going to get serious? I smiled faintly. Working on something. Amber tilted her head. Working on what exactly? I shrugged. Just trying to figure things out. Mom sighed again, disappointed. You've been figuring things out for 10 years. Maybe it's time to admit you're not meant for whatever it is you think you're chasing. That stung. And she knew it. She always knew where to aim. After dinner, as they were leaving, Mom hugged me stiffly and said, We love you, Joey. We just want what's best for you. Which, in Mom speak, meant we love you as long as you stay beneath us. When they left, I stood in the quiet, empty apartment, the smell of reheated chicken lingering in the air. I thought about how none of them had even asked how I was doing, what I'd been up to, if I was happy. It was all subtle jabs and expectations, wrapped in family love. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words. I realized that money wasn't the real test. Character was. And my family was failing miserably. I started to think about ways to expose just how transactional their love really was. Over the next week, I started acting a little different. I dropped small comments. I might have to sell my car, or I think my job's cutting my hours. Every time, I got the same response, silence. No offer to help, no sympathy, just awkward nods or half-hearted, that sucks, man. But then I mentioned it to Clara one afternoon over the phone. If you need anything, Joey, she said instantly, I can send you some money. Don't worry about paying it back. I had to look away because I actually felt my eyes sting a bit. She had so little, and yet she was the only one who gave. A week later, Mom invited me to a family dinner at her house. I knew what that meant. She'd probably found something new to brag about. But I went anyway, because part of me wanted to see how far this charade could go. Her house was the same as always, spotless, overdecorated, filled with fake smiles. Nate was already there, glass of wine in hand, talking about real estate investments. Amber was scrolling through her phone, pretending not to listen. When I walked in, Mom hugged me tightly. Joey, you look thin. Are you eating enough? I'm fine, Mom, I said, stepping back. We sat down, and sure enough, within minutes, the conversation turned toward me. Joey, Mom started, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time you let Nate help you. He's got contacts. He could get you in at his company. Nate smirked. Yeah, man. I could pull some strings. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. And hey, maybe you'll learn a thing or two about responsibility. I felt the corners of my mouth twitch. I appreciate it, I said slowly, but I'm good for now. Mom frowned. Good? Joey, you're nearly 30. You can't live paycheck to paycheck forever. Amber chimed in. Maybe Mom's right. You need to think long-term. Don't you want a house? A future? I looked around at their faces, 3 people who dismissed me, laughed at me, and now pretended to care. Yeah, I said quietly. I do. But then Mom's expression changed. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. You know, Joey, sometimes I worry about you. You're so secretive. You never tell us what's going on. It's hard to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. I laughed softly. Help? Mom, you hung up on me 2 weeks ago when I asked for $200. Her face went red. Don't be dramatic. I was busy. Amber looked between us. You asked Mom for money? Nate laughed. Oh, come on, Joey. You really got to stop with the sob stories. The table went silent for a moment. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Right? I said finally. Sob stories. My bad. Mom sighed like she was the victim. We're just trying to push you, Joey. You're capable of so much more. But you keep making excuses. The rest of dinner was tense. I barely spoke. When I left, I caught Nate whispering something about me to Amber, and they both laughed. Mom pretended not to notice. Driving home, I couldn't shake the image of Clara's face in contrast to theirs. her kindness versus their arrogance. And that's when an idea began to form. Not just to test them anymore, but to teach them. A few days later, I called Mom and told her I'd been let go from the hardware store. "Oh, Joey," she said, sounding genuinely inconvenienced. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," I said softly. "Just trying to get by." "Well, don't expect me to fund another one of your phases," she said quickly. "You've got to be responsible." Then she added, almost like an afterthought, "But maybe Nate can help you find something temporary." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the wall. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. The next day, Clara called again. "Hey," she said, "I was thinking, I have a friend who runs a small cafe. They're hiring part-time. It's not much, but maybe it could help." I smiled into the phone. "You're amazing, Clara." "Really?" She laughed lightly. "No, just human." That single line made me realize what my plan would look like. I'd let my family see what they chose, kindness or convenience. I'd make them face the version of me they thought they were better than, until the moment came when the truth would shatter their perfect little hierarchy. But before that day arrived, something unexpected happened. Mom invited me again, this time to celebrate Nate's birthday. "Bring a small gift if you can," she added, like she was doing me a favor. I didn't realize it then, but that dinner would be the one where everything started to unravel for real. Because someone I didn't expect, was about to expose a small piece of my secret. And once that happened, the masks everyone wore began to slip, one by one. Nate's birthday dinner was at Mom's house, as usual. She loved hosting, mostly because it gave her a chance to show off her new furniture or how spotless her kitchen was. When I arrived, the driveway was already packed. Nate's SUV, Amber's silver sedan, and a couple of cars I didn't recognize. I parked down the street and walked up with a cheap bottle of wine tucked under my arm. Not that anyone there actually drank it. Mom only kept expensive bottles for real guests. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel it. That quiet, invisible shift in the air. The way conversations paused for just a second when I entered the room. The way Mom's smile was just a little too wide, like she was bracing for impact. Nate stood near the dining table surrounded by coworkers, guys in suits, laughing too loudly, holding beers. Amber was helping set up the cake. When she saw me, her smile faltered before she forced it back into place. "Hey, Joey," she said. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, forcing my own smile. Mom swooped in, adjusting my collar like I was a child. "Oh, you look nice," she said. Then, in a lower voice, "Next time, maybe try something a little less casual." I was wearing jeans and a button-up. Everyone else looked like they were at a business networking event. "Sure, Mom," I said, stepping away. Dinner was loud. Nate was the center of attention, cracking jokes, telling stories about work. His friends laughed at everything he said. I sat at the far end of the table next to Amber, who was scrolling through her phone under the tablecloth. Every few minutes, someone would ask Nate about his investments or his new car. No one asked me a single question. I tried to stay quiet, to just observe. But midway through dinner, Mom turned to me and said, "So, Joey, what have you been up to lately? Still between jobs?" Her tone was polite enough to fool a stranger, but I could hear the venom underneath. The guests looked at me with mild curiosity, forks paused midair. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Still figuring things out." One of Nate's co-workers smirked. "Must be nice, man. Wish I could take a year off." Everyone laughed, including Nate. I forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess so." Mom sighed. "You know, Joey, you really should take advantage of having family who can help. I told you Nate could get you something entry-level. It's not glamorous, but it's stable." I nodded again, pretending to be unfazed. "I'll think about it." Amber chimed in. "It'd be good for you, Joey. Routine might help." The table chuckled like that was a clever joke. I sat there, surrounded by people who were supposed to care about me, feeling smaller by the minute. I couldn't even enjoy the food. It tasted like resentment. After dinner, people started moving to the living room for cake and drinks. That's when I saw Clara walk in. I froze. She looked out of place immediately, simple dress, shy smile, holding a wrapped box in both hands. "Hey," she said softly when she spotted me. "Clara? You came." "Of course," she said. "Your mom invited me. Said it'd be good to catch up with everyone." That was news to me. Mom hadn't mentioned inviting her. When Mom saw Clara, her face brightened, fake bright. "Clara, so glad you made it. How lovely of you to bring a gift." Clara smiled. Wouldn't miss Nate's birthday, but I could tell she was nervous. My family had a way of making people feel like intruders in their own skin. During cake, Mom made a toast. She went around the room, thanking everyone for coming. When she reached me, she said, "And of course, Joey's here too. It's good to see him making time for family again." Everyone clapped politely, and I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. Afterward, as people milled around chatting, I saw Mom pull Clara aside in the corner of the room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "Clara, dear," Mom said, her tone sweet but sharp. "You're such a kind girl, always helping everyone. I just hope Joey hasn't been taking advantage of your generosity." Clara blinked. "Excuse me." "Oh, don't misunderstand me," Mom said quickly. "It's just, he told us you brought him groceries and money. You shouldn't let him guilt you like that. He's always been a bit dramatic when he's struggling." Clara's face turned pink. "He didn't guilt me. I offered." Mom sighed, tilting her head. "Of course you did, sweetheart. That's just who you are. But Joey needs to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. You don't want to encourage bad habits, do you?" I could feel my pulse thudding in my ears. I wanted to step in, to defend Clara, but I stayed put. I wanted to see how far Mom would go. Clara's voice was quiet but firm. "I helped him because he's family. Isn't that what we do?" Mom's smile tightened. "Yes, but some family members need tough love. You're too soft, Clara. He'll never change if you keep babying him." That was it. I walked over, pretending to have just joined them. "Everything okay here?" Mom turned, startled. "Of course. We were just chatting." Clara looked uncomfortable. "I should go soon," she said softly. Mom patted her shoulder. "Drive safe, dear." After she left, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why did you say that to her?" Mom blinked innocently. "Say what?" "You know what. You basically told her I'm a leech." "I did not," she said sharply. "I was protecting her. She doesn't know you like we do, Joey. She thinks you're helpless. I didn't want her wasting her time, or money, on your sob stories." "My sob stories," I said, my voice rising. "You hung up on me when I asked for help. She's the only one who even cared." Mom crossed her arms. "Because she's naive. We're trying to make you stronger, Joey. You can't expect handouts forever." I laughed bitterly. "Right? Because you've all been such great teachers." That night, I left early without saying goodbye. Clara texted me later. "Your mom said some strange things. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Yeah. I'm used to it." The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I'd been patient, careful, subtle, but they were never going to see me differently. They'd already written the ending to my story before I even started living it. Then something unexpected happened that made the situation explode. A week later, I got a call from the lawyer who'd handled Uncle Jameson's estate. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I just wanted to confirm that the funds have been successfully transferred into your trust account." "Thanks," I said, distracted. "Is everything else settled?" "Yes. Though I should mention, your mother left a few voicemails here. She's been asking questions about the will." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know if she was entitled to any portion of the inheritance." I, of course, couldn't disclose details, but she was insistent. I thanked him and hung up, my mind spinning. How did she even find out? I hadn't told a soul. Not even Clara. I hadn't bought anything new. I hadn't changed my routine. Then it hit me. Mom must have noticed the call history when I borrowed her charger last week. My phone had lit up with a voicemail from the lawyer's office, and she'd probably gone snooping, like she always did. Later that evening, she showed up unannounced at my apartment. She didn't even knock, just opened the door like she owned the place. "We need to talk," she said. I felt my stomach knot. "About what?" She closed the door behind her, crossing her arms. "Don't play dumb, Joey. I know about the will." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, come on," she said, her voice sharp. "The lawyer called. You think I don't have ears? How long were you planning on keeping it from us?" My throat went dry. "There's nothing to keep." "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I spoke to Jameson's lawyer myself. He didn't give me details, but I'm not an idiot. You think you can hide $100 million from your own family?" The room went quiet. She'd said it. Out loud. $100 million. I looked at her, stunned, as she stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what that money could do for this family? For me? For your brother and sister? You're not capable of handling that kind of responsibility, Joey. You'd blow it on something stupid within a year." "Wow," I said quietly. "Thanks for the confidence." She scoffed. Don't be dramatic. I'm trying to help you. We can manage it together. I already spoke to Nate. He knows someone who can invest it properly. We'll make sure it doesn't go to waste. You told Nate. I said, my heart pounding. Of course I did. He's family. We look out for each other. I stared at her, speechless. In a single breath, she'd told my brother about my inheritance, something I hadn't even told my best friend, and was already making plans for my money. Get out, I said quietly. Her expression hardened. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of my apartment. Joey, don't be ridiculous. Now. She glared at me for a long moment before finally grabbing her purse. You're making a huge mistake, she said coldly. When you come to your senses, don't expect me to fix this for you. The door slammed behind her. I stood there in silence, my pulse hammering in my ears. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about trust. She'd invaded my privacy, gone behind my back, and told Nate something I wasn't ready for anyone to know. But it was only when Nate called later that night, laughing, casual, smug, that I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. Bro, he said, you really thought you could hide 100 mil from us? Come on, man. We're family. I didn't answer. He continued, look, don't make this weird. Mom and I just want to make sure you don't do anything stupid. We're going to help you, okay? That's what family does. That line, the same one Clara had said with kindness, came out of his mouth like poison. And that's when I knew. They weren't helping me. They were circling, like vultures. The next few days were chaos, quiet, suffocating chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails from Mom, from Nate, even from Amber. I ignored them all. Every message sounded the same. Joey, we just want to talk. Joey, don't be immature. Joey, you're not thinking straight. Each time I saw their names light up on my screen, my stomach twisted. The one thing I'd wanted to avoid, exactly what I was testing for, had happened. The moment they smelled money, all pretense of respect or care evaporated. By the fourth day, I finally turned my phone off completely. The silence was a relief, but it also left me alone with my thoughts. My mind replayed that moment with Mom, the way she'd looked at me, not as her son, but as a walking opportunity. It was like I'd been reduced to a number in her head. I didn't tell Clara what happened. She texted me once, just a short, hey, everything okay? Haven't heard from you. I typed out a reply 3 times and deleted it every time. I didn't want to drag her into the mess. She was the only one who'd shown me genuine kindness. That weekend, I went for a long drive. No destination, just the road and my thoughts. The money still didn't feel real. I hadn't touched it. The lawyer had it locked away in a trust, exactly as I'd instructed. I didn't want the cars, the houses, the power. Not yet. Not when my head was still full of noise. At one point, I stopped at a small diner off the highway. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee and watched families come and go. Parents laughing, kids arguing, people just being together. It made something ache inside me. I realized that money didn't fix loneliness. If anything, it just exposed who had always been fake. When I got back home, I found a note taped to my door in my mom's handwriting. Joey, we're worried. You're shutting everyone out. Call us. We just want what's best. Love, Mom. That last word, love, looked like an afterthought. 2 days later, she showed up again, this time with Nate. I heard the knock and instantly felt dread settle in my chest. I almost didn't answer, but their persistence made it clear they wouldn't leave until I did. When I opened the door, Mom gave me that tight, rehearsed smile. We just want to talk, she said. Nate stood behind her with his arms crossed, already looking irritated. About what? I asked flatly. Mom stepped inside without waiting for permission. Joey, this is ridiculous. We're family. You're acting like we're strangers. Maybe that's because you are, I said. Nate scoffed. Here we go? Playing the victim again. Mom shot him a warning look, then turned back to me. We're just worried, honey. You've never had this kind of responsibility before. $100 million isn't something you can just sit on. People will take advantage of you. I stared at her. You mean like you did? Her face tightened. Don't twist my words. I was trying to protect you. By calling the lawyer? By telling Nate. Nate held up his hands. Whoa, relax. It's not like we're trying to steal from you. Could have fooled me, I said. Mom's voice sharpened. Enough with the attitude. You have no idea what you're doing. That money came from family. It belongs to this family. There it was. The truth. I almost laughed. It belongs to me, Mom. Uncle Jameson left it to me. Not you. Not Nate. not anyone else. She stepped closer, her voice dropping low. You're not equipped to handle this, Joey. You've struggled your whole life. You're impulsive, emotional, irresponsible. Say broke, I interrupted. Go ahead. That's what you mean. She froze for a second, then exhaled. Fine. Yes. You've always been unstable with money. You think I'm being cruel, but I'm trying to save you from yourself. I felt something crack inside me. You don't even know me. The argument spiraled after that. Nate chimed in, lecturing me about financial literacy while bragging about his investments. Mom started talking about forming a family trust so that everyone benefits. I tried to stay calm, but eventually I just said, get out. They didn't move. Now, I repeated. Mom looked like she wanted to say more, but Nate grabbed her arm. Let's go, Mom. He'll come around. Before leaving, Mom turned and said something that hit harder than anything else that night. You're making the same mistake your father did, thinking you can do everything alone. And look how that ended. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the apartment felt smaller than ever. I sank into the couch, staring at the dark TV screen, hearing her words echo in my head. That night, I barely slept. Every thought looped back to the same question. How had I become the villain in their story? They were the ones who'd turned their backs on me when I needed them most. Yet now I was the ungrateful one for not handing over a fortune. A few days passed. Then Amber called. I almost ignored it, but decided to answer. Her voice was cautious, softer than usual. Hey, Joey, she said. I heard about what happened with Mom. Of course you did, I said. She hesitated. Look, she didn't mean to upset you. She worries. I laughed quietly. She's worried about her cut. Amber didn't deny it. Maybe, but you can't just shut us all out. Your family. Funny, I said. When I was struggling, you didn't sound this concerned. Come on, Joey, she said, almost pleading. That's not fair. We all have our own lives. Yeah, and now that mine suddenly matters, everyone remembers I exist. She was silent for a while. Then she said something that stuck with me. You think this money changes who we are? But it's changing you too. I hung up. The next morning, I went for another drive, this time out toward the countryside. The roads were empty, the fields stretching endlessly under gray skies. I found a small park by a lake and sat there for hours. The water was calm, unmoving. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. When I got home that evening, I checked my mail. Among the bills and junk flyers was a small handwritten envelope. It was from Clara. Inside was a simple note. Hey Joey, I don't know what's going on, but I wanted to tell you something. Whatever it is, don't let them change who you are. You've always had a good heart, and that's worth more than any money. If you ever need a place to breathe, my door's open. See, I read it twice, then folded it neatly and put it in my wallet. For some reason, it felt like an anchor, a reminder that not everyone saw me as a paycheck. Over the next week, I started avoiding town altogether. I drive to remote cafes, eat at odd hours, and park on side streets just to avoid running into anyone I knew. Word had spread fast. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly texted me. Hey man, long time no talk, or heard some crazy news, hit me up. I didn't reply to any of them. But the real blow came the following Monday. I stopped by the grocery store, and the cashier, a woman I'd known since high school, smiled and said, So, Mr. Millionaire, what's it like being famous? My stomach sank. Where'd you hear that? I asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, your brother mentioned it. Said he's helping you manage it all. Must be nice having a smart family. I left the groceries right there and walked out. The air outside felt colder than usual. Nate hadn't just told Mom. He was telling everyone. That night, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I sat in the dark, surrounded by the faint hum of the city, feeling completely hollow. My own brother was bragging about money that wasn't even his, and Mom was probably already fantasizing about family foundations and photo ops. For a while, I thought about giving it all up, signing the money away, disappearing somewhere far, somewhere quiet. Maybe then they'd finally stop seeing me as a bank account. But deep down, another thought started to form. A quieter one. If they wanted to play this game, maybe I could play it better. So I called the lawyer. We talked for over an hour. I asked about restructuring the trust, about the legalities of anonymity, about how to protect assets without anyone knowing where they were. He listened carefully and said, Mr. Carter, it's your estate. You can do whatever you wish. Just remember, secrecy is power. That phrase stuck in my head like a mantra. Over the next few weeks, I started laying the groundwork. I didn't tell anyone, not Clara, not even my lawyer, the full picture. I moved quietly, methodically, transferring certain assets, setting up a holding company under a new name. I started to realize that revenge didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes, the most satisfying kind was silent, invisible, and perfectly timed. But before I could fully disappear, my family made one last move, a desperate one. Because apparently, when vultures can't find a carcass, they start circling harder. And soon, I'd find out just how far they were willing to go. The silence was the best part. No more calls, no more knocks, no more guilt-tripped family dinners. It was like someone had lifted a weight I'd been carrying my whole life without realizing it. I didn't tell anyone, but I moved out of my apartment quietly one morning. I left the key on the counter, the fridge empty, and the place spotless, almost like I'd never existed there at all. The new place was small but hidden, a private home tucked along a quiet hillside 2 towns over. I bought it through a holding company I'd set up with the lawyer's help. No one knew my name was on the paperwork. It wasn't a mansion, just a modern, secluded place with tall windows, a lake view, and the kind of peace I'd never had before. Every morning, I'd wake up to birds instead of traffic, coffee in hand, the fog rolling off the water. And every morning, I'd remind myself, they don't know I'm here. The first month was strange. I wasn't used to stillness. For so long, my days had been noise, people doubting me, criticizing me, treating me like I'd never measure up. Now I was alone, and I realized how much space that noise had taken in my head. Once it was gone, I finally had room to think. So I started working. Not the kind of work they'd respect. No office, no title, but something better. I started reading, studying, planning. I learned how to invest without anyone knowing. I put money into businesses under quiet aliases, cafes, small logistics companies, even a real estate group in another state. I wasn't chasing wealth anymore. I was building control. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family spent their lives trying to look successful. I was becoming it in silence. Months passed. The lawyer handled most of the official matters for me, but I started taking more interest in how things worked. I realized Uncle Jameson hadn't just been rich, he'd been smart. He'd built a network of small companies that all supported each other, from construction to finance to property management. And now I was at the center of it, rebuilding it piece by piece, growing it even bigger. And no one had any idea. I didn't post online. I didn't tell old friends. To them, I'd vanished. Rumors floated around town that I'd gone bankrupt, moved overseas, or checked into rehab. My mom even told people she hadn't heard from me in months, like I was some lost cause. I let her talk. The more they underestimated me, the freer I became. Meanwhile, Clara kept texting once in a while. Always simple things like "hope you're doing okay" or "haven't seen you in a bit, miss our talks." I finally replied one day and invited her to lunch. We met at a little diner halfway between our towns. When she saw me, she smiled with that same quiet warmth I remembered. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. "Better or worse?" I joked. "Better. Calmer." We talked for hours. I didn't tell her everything, just that I'd started something new and was finally figuring things out. She didn't ask for details, and I loved her for that. No curiosity about the money, no subtle questions. Just genuine care. Before she left, she gave me a small plant. "For your new place," she said, "so it doesn't feel empty." That plant sat on my kitchen counter for months. Every time I saw it, it reminded me that not everyone in my bloodline was rotten. By the end of that year, my portfolio had doubled. I'd quietly acquired a controlling interest in 3 small companies and launched one under a new brand name, Carter and Vale Holdings. I hired a team under pseudonyms, gave them generous pay, and kept my name entirely off the radar. Power didn't feel like what I thought it would. It wasn't loud or thrilling. It was quiet, deliberate, peaceful. It was waking up each day knowing no one could touch what you built. Then, one morning, I saw something that made me stop mid-sip of coffee. An article popped up online. Nate Carter joins real estate board for upcoming development. There was a photo of him in a suit, shaking hands with investors. The caption mentioned backing from private funding. I couldn't help but laugh, because that private funding came from one of my shell companies. He was bragging about success that I'd financed, without him ever knowing it. It was poetic in a way. He'd mocked me for being broke, told me to get a job, and now he was unknowingly working for me. I could have ended it there, just smiled at the irony and kept living quietly. But there was still one part of me, the part that remembered every sneer and every time they made me feel worthless, that whispered, they still think you're nothing. They still don't know. So I started planning something bigger. Not revenge yet, not exactly. More like exposure. I wanted the truth to reveal itself naturally, in a way they couldn't twist or deny. I began attending a few local charity galas and business mixers, always under my alias, Elliot Vale. I wore tailored suits, stayed polite, and listened more than I spoke. I learned how people like my mom operated, fake kindness wrapped around greed. And I learned how to spot it instantly. It wasn't long before I was invited to a high-end real estate banquet in the city. I recognized a few of the names on the list, including Nate's. He was scheduled to give a short speech about modern investment strategies. That night, as I stood in that crowd, watching him talk about hard work and humble beginnings, I felt something shift again. The room clapped for him, and he smiled like he owned the world. And all I could think was, you have no idea who signed your checks. I didn't confront him that night. Not yet. I left early, got in my car, and drove back to my quiet house on the hill. But as I drove, one thought played over and over in my head. I had built something that could change all of our lives, and this time, I'd decide who deserved it. The next step wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be vengeful, at least not at first. It would be subtle, a slow, deliberate peeling back of every mask they wore. Because while they were still playing at being successful, I was about to show them what real power looked like. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just shock them. It would rewrite everything they thought they knew about me. It started with an email. Just one. From a name I didn't recognize at first, Margaret Bellamy, a partner at a prestigious firm that handled luxury estate sales. She wrote that a client named Linda Carter, my mother, had applied for a line of credit using collateral tied to an upcoming inheritance trust. My inheritance. That was the moment I knew the game had officially begun. I called her office the next morning, still using my alias, Elliot Vale. She picked up on the second ring. Mr. Vale, thank you for returning my call. We're simply verifying that this particular trust, the Carter Family Beneficiary Fund, is legitimate. We've had conflicting information. Conflicting information. Translation, my mother was lying to them. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. I see. Well, I happen to be familiar with the trustees overseeing that account. I can assure you no such collateralization has been approved. I'd proceed with caution. She thanked me and promised to freeze all pending applications until further notice. The satisfaction that washed over me was cold, clean, and quiet. Mom was trying to borrow money based on my inheritance, money she'd already been told she had no access to. She must have thought if she pretended it was a family account, no one would dig too deep. She underestimated me. Again, I didn't call her. I didn't even let her know I knew. Instead, I decided to let her, and the rest of them, walk right into the trap they'd built themselves. The next few weeks, I made moves like a chess player setting the board for checkmate. I created a public-facing branch of one of my shell companies under my alias. It looked like a small but legitimate investment firm that specialized in development partnerships. I used it to quietly buy out a few of the struggling companies my brother's firm worked with. Nothing flashy, nothing traceable, just one after another, until half of his network was indirectly owned by me. Every email he sent, every contract he signed, every deal he bragged about online, it all eventually led back to me. He didn't know it, of course. To him, I was still his loser little brother who couldn't hold a job. The real test came when my lawyer forwarded me an invitation. It was for a charity gala in the city, the same one my mother had been obsessed with for years. She'd always wanted to be on the event committee, but never had the status to pull it off. This year, though, the primary sponsor was Carter and Vale Holdings, my company. I decided I'd go. When the night arrived, I wore a black tailored suit, slicked my hair back, and left the name tag blank. Nobody there knew me as Joey. To them, I was Mr. Vale, investor, strategist, quiet success story. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers and expensive laughter. Waiters floated by with champagne. I was standing near the silent auction table when I heard her voice, Mom's, that familiar, self-satisfied tone cutting through the chatter like a knife. Oh, I'm so glad we're all here, she was telling someone. My son Nate helped fund part of this event. He's doing very well in real estate, you know. I turned. She looked exactly as she always had. Flawless hair, pearl earrings, that same air of control. Nate was beside her, his tie perfectly straight, his grin confident. Amber stood behind them, nodding along, holding her drink like she didn't want to be there. When Mom's eyes met mine, she froze. "Do I know you?" she asked. I smiled politely. "Not personally. Elliot Vale." I offered my hand. She shook it, still searching my face. "Ah, yes. You're one of the sponsors, aren't you?" "Something like that," I said. Nate stepped forward, ever the opportunist. "Carter and Vale, right? We've heard a lot about your firm. My company's actually partnered with one of your subsidiaries." I tilted my head. "Really? Which one?" "Midwest Urban Development." I smiled faintly. "Ah, yes. Good people." He grinned, oblivious. "Yeah, we've got a few projects lined up this quarter. If you're ever in need of consultants, I'd be happy to." Mom interrupted, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't be rude, Nathan. Mr. Vale probably gets offers all the time." I laughed lightly. "Actually, I don't mind. I admire ambition. It's a rare thing these days." They had no idea who I was. I spent the rest of the evening watching them work the room. Mom charming investors with empty flattery, Nate boasting about his deals, Amber looking more uncomfortable by the minute. Later that night, during the live auction, the host called for final pledges. The top item was a land development contract worth several million, an exclusive partnership opportunity. When the bidding began, I raised my number discreetly. Mom turned to watch, eyes gleaming. She whispered something to Nate, probably telling him to bid too, to impress the crowd. He did. I raised again. He followed. I raised once more, calm, deliberate. By the end, I'd outbid him by a landslide. The host announced, "Sold to Mr. Vale of Carter and Vale Holdings." The crowd applauded politely. Nate laughed awkwardly, pretending not to care. When it was over, I walked past him on my way out. "Pleasure doing business," I said. He smiled, confused, thinking I was just being cordial. 2 weeks later, his company got a notice that one of their biggest investors was pulling out due to restructuring. That investor? Me. A week after that, another one followed. Then another. Within a month, his company was bleeding money. His project stalled. Investors went silent. The empire he'd built on borrowed pride and fake charm started crumbling from the inside. Mom called him every day, panicking. I knew because she tried calling me again too. Left voicemails, desperate now. "Joey, please call me. There's been confusion. Nate's business is falling apart. I think someone's sabotaging us." Sabotaging us? That made me laugh out loud. For the first time in my life, they needed me. And I wasn't there. But I wasn't done. Remember that line of credit Mom had tried to secure earlier? I made a quiet call to the same firm. Posed again as Mr. Vale. I asked them to release all pending documentation related to the Carter Family Beneficiary Fund to the Financial Oversight Board for review. I didn't have to lie, just suggest that possible fraudulent activity had been reported. Within a week, her accounts were frozen for investigation. Her reputation, the one she'd spent decades polishing, began to crack. She couldn't host events, couldn't access funds, couldn't even renew her business memberships. People she used to gossip with stopped returning her calls. And all I did was wait. One night, around midnight, I got a knock at my door. I already knew who it was before I even checked the camera feed. Mom stood outside, hair messy, face pale, clutching her purse like it was a life vest. When I opened the door, she froze. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Joey," she whispered. "Oh my God. Hi, Mom," I said calmly. "It's been a while." She blinked hard. You're Mr. Vale?" I nodded. Her hands trembled. "You did this. To us." I stepped aside so she could see the house behind me. Clean, quiet, modern. "You did it to yourself," I said softly. "You tried to take what wasn't yours." Her voice broke. "I just wanted to protect you." "By stealing from me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me this time. I'd seen that act before. "You made me feel small my whole life," I said. "And the second I had something of my own, you tried to take it. You didn't protect me, Mom. You made sure I'd never believe I deserved more." She shook her head, muttering, "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." For a long moment, we stood there in silence. She finally turned to leave, shoulders shaking. But just before she stepped off the porch, I said, "I'm not cruel, Mom. I'm just done. You and Nate will be fine, eventually." just not on my back anymore. She didn't look back. When she was gone, I walked out onto the deck. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, perfectly still. It was over. But even then, I knew this wasn't just revenge. It was balance. They'd spent their lives teaching me that family meant control, that love meant leverage. I'd finally taught them what it really meant. That once you break trust, it doesn't matter how much blood you share. You're just strangers in the end. And though part of me wanted to let it rest, another part knew the story wasn't quite finished yet. Because there was one person left I hadn't reached out to. Clara. It was a few weeks before I finally called Clara. I didn't know how to explain everything without it sounding like a movie plot. But she picked up on the first ring, cheerful as ever. "Joey. Wow, it's been ages," she said. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said quietly. "Better, actually. There's something I want to tell you. And something I want to do." We met the next afternoon at the same little diner where we'd had lunch months before. She looked the same. Calm, genuine, no makeup, no pretenses. Just the kind of person who didn't need to pretend to be decent. I told her everything. From the inheritance to the fake name, to what I'd done to my family. I expected her to look horrified. But she didn't. She just listened, stirring her coffee slowly, then said, "You didn't hurt them. You showed them who they really were." I exhaled. "It still feels heavy." "Of course it does," she said. "You cared about them, even if they didn't deserve it. You just finally stopped letting them use that against you." There was a long pause before she added, "So what happens now?" That question had haunted me for weeks. I'd already seen the fallout start to unfold like a slow storm. Nate's company had gone under completely. The last I'd heard, he'd been forced to sell his house and was working under someone else, someone who probably didn't know half of what he'd lost. He'd stopped boasting online, stopped calling investors his team. Mom was worse. Her reputation was gone. The financial probe had embarrassed her publicly. The people she used to brag to now crossed the street to avoid her. She'd lost her committees, her friends, her image. She still had a small pension, but not the world she'd built her ego on. Amber had reached out to me once, just once. Her message was short. "You didn't deserve how they treated you. I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry at her. I just didn't know what to say. Now, sitting across from Clara, I finally did. "What happens now," I said, "is peace. I don't need them anymore. But I also don't need to punish them anymore. It's done." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time to live." We finished our coffee in silence. The world outside the window felt oddly brighter, like I was seeing it through new eyes. Over the next few months, I started giving back in small ways, quietly, anonymously. A few scholarships through one of my holding companies. A donation to a youth shelter. I even helped fund a local business in Clara's town when she mentioned it was struggling. She found out eventually, of course, but only because she recognized my handwriting on a thank you letter from the owners. "You're impossible," she said over the phone, laughing softly. "Just making sure the good people win for once," I said. Time passed. Mom sent me one final letter, handwritten, shaky, probably because she didn't know how else to reach me. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my desk for days before I finally unfolded it. "Joey, I don't know what to say except I was wrong. About everything. I thought controlling things meant protecting them. I thought pushing you meant helping you. I didn't realize I was just trying to make you smaller, so I could feel in control. You didn't deserve that. I hope one day you can forgive me. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times before setting it down. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt calm. Maybe that was forgiveness. Not rushing to feel one way or another, just letting things settle. The following weekend, I drove back to the old town for the first time in nearly a year. Everything looked smaller, the houses, the streets, even the people walking by. I stopped in front of the laundromat apartment I used to live above. The windows were dark. Someone else lived there now. I stood there for a while, remembering that version of me. The one who was tired, broke, and still trying to make his family proud. I didn't hate him. I just wished I could tell him that it was never his job to prove anything to anyone. When I got back to my lake house that night, I found Clara sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. She'd started visiting more often lately, bringing books, tea, and quiet conversation. She smiled when she saw me. "You look lighter," she said. "I think I finally am," I said. We sat there for a long time, watching the sky turn orange and gold. I told her I'd been thinking of expanding my company into community projects, helping people who reminded me of who I used to be. She liked that idea. That's a good kind of full circle, she said. The last of the sunlight flickered across the lake, and for once, I didn't feel like something was missing. I didn't feel angry or bitter, just free. My mother would probably never fully understand what she lost. Nate would rebuild, eventually, though maybe humbler this time. Amber would keep her distance, quietly keeping her job, her head down. And me? I'd keep building, but not for revenge anymore. For peace. Because that's the thing no one tells you about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about getting past it. I glanced at the calm water, the reflection of the sunset spreading like fire across its surface, and smiled. Funny, I said quietly. I had to lose a family to finally find peace. And Clara, without missing a beat, replied, No, Joey, you didn't lose one. You just made room for a better one. The wind rippled across the lake, and for the first time in my life, I believed her.